Hello there. Welcome back to Today in Bad Theology. I just posted a day ago, but you never know when bad theology will strike, and it struck today in a big way at the President's midday press briefing. Today, this Friday, I lost track of what date it is, Friday, May 22nd, President Trump announced that he was ordering all of our nation's governors to reopen their houses of worship with no restrictions. Now, there are a lot of very good questions about this. Legal questions. On what authority is he's saying he's going to do this? Just general questions. Why? But we're here to talk about why it's bad theology. And it is bad theology. It's disturbingly bad theology. We'll look at three things that make this bad theology. All right? Number one, this is a pandemic of a respiratory illness that we know spreads primarily through droplets that escape from those who are carrying the virus, through sneezing, coughing, breathing, singing, talking loudly enough to be heard, like at a church service, things like that. So we know that's how it spreads. There are other ways that we think it spreads, and we're constantly debating how much of it spreads those ways, but we're fairly certain about the droplets that people breathe out. And respiratory illnesses are going to spread very, very quickly in a room packed full of people who are singing and coughing and whatnot, which is what church is. If you've ever been to church, we sing, we cough. That's what we do. So it's not a great idea. Now, 55% of Americans believe that God will protect them from the coronavirus. I'm not one of those. That's not how that works, and we know that's not how that works. Countless Christians have prayed that God would save them from a disease, and it didn't happen. And God didn't say God was going to. That was our idea. In the Middle Ages, the plague would strike, and people were desperately looking for solutions. They would launch these plague processions. They'd march around, flagellating themselves on the back and crying out to God for help. And these stories of people collapsing during these marches because they were sick. You can't pray this away. It's not going to happen. If your faith believes that that's what's going to happen, your faith is up against scientific facts. And it's an uncomfortable but certain truth in theology that when your theology runs into science and science says, that's not how that works and we can prove it, you need to reevaluate your theology. Evolution's a prime example. There are plenty of churches that refuse to accept that evolution is a thing. My church accepts it. That this is what makes the most sense, and because that's what science shows us, and that doesn't disprove God. It doesn't disprove the Bible. The Bible was never claiming to be a science book anyways. And we're forced to say, well, I guess, God is so big that God actually created this universe we can't quite see the edge of, and that's just massive beyond our understanding, and is older than the human brain can comprehend. Look how much bigger God got just because we realized how big the world was. Our concept of God had to grow because of that. That's not a danger to your theology. Your theology has to adapt. And we've done that on other things. The debate around abortion. One of the arguments was always on the viability of a fetus. Well, we know that it's viable much earlier on in a pregnancy with modern technology, which has forced those who say women should have access to abortion rights to recalibrate their arguments. It can't just be about when a fetus is viable. If you have a theological claim for why abortion rights should be there, you have to go about it a different way. You can't focus on that because science has shown and technology has proven that we could actually do this if we set out to. So science runs into theology, and when it does, theology must adapt. Here, when we're talking about a respiratory pandemic, theology must adapt. I want to be in church really badly. I love church. I'm one of those church geeks who thinks worship is the most fun you can have. It is dangerous right now. Saying that it's not is ignoring the science, and ignoring science is bad theology. Right? Point number 2. I'm looking at my fingers here in the camera. Point number 2. The president's argument was, that churches need to be open because America needs prayer. Our society needs prayer. This is an argument that somehow, the church makes a better society, and prayer makes a better society. And I'm certainly of the opinion that the church can make society better, and that prayer is an important component in that. The church is not a building, so we pray whenever and wherever. The facilities exist just as a place to gather. The church can pray and work all over the place, and has been for 2 millennia. We don't need a building in order to do that. But, what the church does to make society better is it follows its mission. And its mission boils down to what Jesus said were the top 2 commandments: love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. And the church follows those commands, or at least tries to. So our decision, my congregation's decision, my denomination's decision to encourage remote worship when technology exists that allows it, is to promote life and health. We love you, and we don't want you to get sick unnecessarily. It's somewhat amusing to me that the same voices saying that the church must be open now to promote the fabric of society are the ones that came after my denomination, the ELCA, when we declared ourselves a sanctuary denomination in August of 2019. Then we said, we stand with immigrants. These are folks who are exceptionally vulnerable, and someone has to stand with them, and we are going to. We are going to advocate for their presence in this country and for protections for them. We may choose to house them. I don't know what we're going to do exactly. It's kind of left up to individual congregations. That's the way my church functions. But we became a sanctuary denomination, and we were accused in a Fox News hit piece, appropriately run on a Sunday morning while we were all in church. We were accused of undermining the fabric of society. Now, we made that decision to welcome immigrants out of a concern for their lives, just as we're not worshiping in person out of a concern for people's lives. One wonders if our theological mistake, in the eyes of some, is that we want people to live, or if perhaps the bad theology of others is that they just would rather people die. I'm searching for answers here. It's bad theology, though, to argue that what society needs is for the church to ramp up the number of infections. This, then, is our get my hang of third point. The third place where theology falls apart here is in the role of civil authority. Now, this is not a constitutional question. It's not a U.S. government question. This is to do with what civil authority is according to the church. Can civil authority declare that the country needs prayers, and so you're going to go to church and pray them? Denominations all have their own various descriptions of this, their understandings of this question. For Roman Catholics, God created everything, ergo God created civil authority. We must not have anarchy, we must have order, but there are laws that can be tyrannical if they are arbitrary. And so those kinds of laws must be opposed because that's not the civil authority God created. For Lutherans, we tend to take a slightly simplified version of that. It doesn't always work as well. That one must follow civil authority unless that authority teaches us something contrary to the gospel or forces us to act in a manner contrary to the gospel. This is the teaching that caused a great deal of consternation to many Lutherans in Germany who were not followers of the Third Reich, but were trying to figure out how they could oppose their government without breaking what they considered to be a religious commandment. And it was this understanding that famously led Dietrich Bonhoeffer to join the Valkyrie plot to assassinate Hitler. In his opinion, the government has grossly overstepped its bounds and must be opposed. In whatever system you've got, there's an assumption that the civil authority is there to protect us. The job of civil authority is to protect human beings, to keep us safe, to encourage our livelihoods, to make sure that we can live in peace and safety. When your understanding of civil authority is rejecting overwhelming medical evidence and saying that what you should do is pack yourselves together and spray aerosols in each other's faces, your civil authority is bad theology in action. This is not Christian government. Not sure what the heck it is, but it's bad theology. That's it for this day. We live in a time when news likes to drop on a Friday, and so that's when we got to talk about this one. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Drop something in the comments below if you want, and take care of yourselves. Have a good weekend.